What we're pushing for today, putting this out on CBC, is we're looking for an immediate rent freeze, rent waiver, stopping all rent payments for April 1st. Ideally, we'd like to do something longer than that, but I think for a lot of the people that we're dealing with right now, the main issue for them is that they're scrambling. A lot of them have lost employment. A lot of them have rent coming up, and they need to buy, food, medicine, and everything else in their life. We just launched a kind of petition today to try to push the government on that, but we're also connecting with all of our members and all the people that we know online and trying to push them to kind of promote this as far and wide as they can. COVID-19 is kind of causing the immediate recession, but frankly, we went through a lot of this back in 2008 during the financial crisis. You saw a major spike in non-payment evictions because people just didn't have any money because they were getting all laid off. The two big crises from this are mainly, neoliberalism, which has been gutting our employment and worker protection stocks for years, driving wages lower, driving worker power lower. And what that's meant is that people are often in these kind of precarious positions so that when something like COVID-19 happens, they're pushed to the line. The other thing that's really the cause of this, believe it or not, is kind of a series of changes that really took a major crux in both 1993 and in 2000 and maybe 9 or 10. So in 1993, two things happened that were of really big importance. First of all, the federal government stopped spending money on housing. Affordable housing has never been built due to the philanthropy of developers. It's almost always been built due to these large-scale federal supply programs that mostly ran from, the 1950s to the 1990s. Those were actually the result of, believe it or not, veterans activism. So veterans coming back from the war were kind of living in a situation that Toronto's in today, and they did a lot of the things that you're seeing today. They did rent strikes, they occupied offices, they occupied and took over hotels, and that spurred the government to start a lot of the supply programs that built most of the housing that's all across Canada today. And what also happened in 1993 is that real estate investment trusts were legalized. And this was a market shift that took housing from being infrastructure, like pipes and roads, and turned it into a commodity. And that commodity really took off in about 2009 and 2010. Everyone knew that there was a major financial crisis, but what I don't think people realized is that a lot of the big pools of money, the capitalist dollars that were invested in the US housing system, they kind of didn't have anywhere else to go. And what you've seen since then is what's happening in Toronto and in Vancouver, but also all over the world. That's kind of the main cause of where we're at, where everyone's too close to the line, housing costs are shooting through the roof, workers' kind of financial and bargaining power has been really eroded. And the moment a crisis hits, snap, everyone is all of a sudden looking at eviction and not being able to feed their families. First of all, about half the stock in Toronto, at least, is owned by corporations. So, large-scale corporations that work in housing, and about maybe 10% overall is owned by real estate investment trusts or REITs. So what they've done is twofold. First of all, they've bought a lot of the stock and are keeping it in kind of a wholesale manner. They're concentrating the amount of housing. And what they're also doing at the same time is keeping a lot of the units vacant. A lot of people are just buying up units and keeping them empty. And, pretty basic economics why you do that. If you leave, a building empty, the building that you got full, the price goes up. And so if you leave it empty for 5 years, you're going to see a price spike, and that becomes kind of the new level. At the same time that they're strangling supply on purpose, and the government's not building any supply, and they haven't been for 30 years, and you're seeing these massive price spikes, they're also being very aggressive in terms of illegal behavior. The best we're able to estimate is that there's about 25,000 illegal evictions happening every year in Ontario right now. So landlords are just en masse trying to push people out. And you've seen a lot of different stories around that, even including today during the COVID-19 crisis. So you're seeing landlords, rent evicting people, and the renovations are just completely fake. And in addition to that, people are making a lot of money. So they're a lot of the people in power, that's who they're having lunch with. That's who they're meeting at the Empire and Canada Club. And they're making a killing right now. I think a couple things need to happen right now. So first of all, probably the most important thing right now from a health standpoint is that people have to have housing. We were able, along with about a dozen other agencies, to get the Ontario government to commit to an eviction freeze, an eviction postponement. You've got about 10,000 people living on the streets in Toronto right now, and they need a place to live immediately. A lot of those in power have had just a complete disrespect and a total lack of dignity for the homeless populations. Generally, it's kind of a matter of life and death for them right now to do this, because it doesn't matter if it's 10,000 homeless people that are totally overrunning our hospitals, or 10,000 rich people that are totally overrunning our hospitals. If they're overrun, people are going to die. The choice is between housing these people or mass graves. I live in Toronto, which is a treaty territory and completely stolen land from Indigenous people. And in the north of Ontario, they're talking about things like isolation tents, which, in addition to being completely insulting, again isn't going to help deal with a brutal pandemic crisis. Those people need medical facilities, they need decent housing, and they need it as quickly as possible, again, to ensure that this doesn't spread and totally kill off a lot of people and overwhelm medical facilities in the north. So we've called for a number of things. The federal government put out a large package that has a lot of kind of money in it for various people, but it's not really targeted to renters in any way. You might get some money if you're dealing with a child benefit. You might get some money if you're applying for EI, but other than that, you might not get it, and you might not be able to get enough. We're looking for a couple things. Again, we've launched an action hoping that people sign up en masse to get April rent canceled. Beyond that, again, we want to see money through some kind of federal program or some kind of provincial program, if it comes to that, for renters and for people that, again, need to live their lives. For the homeless population, well, we've suggested in the press that you've got 10,000 homeless people in Toronto and 10,000 illegal Airbnb units, 100,000 vacant condo units. Those need to be temporarily seized. And while it might sound like a radical proposition, California just rented 108,000 hotel rooms for their homeless populations. It might sound radical, but again, what's more radical in a time like this is digging mass graves and body bags.